All right, welcome back to another edition of Drummer Nation, and we've got a new series going. This is episode 2 of something we're calling Trading Fours. And I have a few guests, a few friends I want you to welcome, but I don't recognize any of them. No, actually, these scary cats are none other than Adam Nussbaum. There he is. Harold Jones. And there he is. And the man with his eyes popping out of his head is Ed Soph. And my disguise is I'm disguised as a normal person. Remember that David Steinberg? Yeah, ish. Remember that David Steinberg album, Disguised as a Normal Person? I'm showing my age.
Yeah.
Anyway, we stumbled upon a good. It was the idea is trading fours, just four jazz drummers talking about jazz music and drummers. And Ed stumbled on the idea last time that maybe we should pick a couple of drummers that are well known, certainly to us in the jazz community, jazz drummers, but maybe not to other drummers in other genres or other musicians in any field. And so today we thought we might talk about two wonderful drummers, Grady Tate and pardon me, Joe Chambers. So I know, Harold, you knew Grady very well, right?
Yes, I did. When I was living in New York. Yeah, well, he and I used to hang out. We'd go over to Jim and Andy's and just watch guys try to get that quarter off the floor that Jake Hanna had super glued down.
Jim and Andy's was a famous bar in New York where all the musicians, especially drummers, would hang out.
Yeah.
And I think Grady tells the story of walking in there once and walking to Joe Jones, who was
Oh,
his
yeah.
hero, and he's got an anecdote he tells about that. But
Yeah.
now you guys both worked with a lot of the same people, especially singers.
Yeah. Yeah. And anytime I heard a swinging drummer behind a singer and didn't know who it was Grady Tate.
Well, it could have been, but behind. I'm sorry, I got some notes here. Tony Bennett, Lena Horne, Peggy Lee, Pearl Bailey, Aretha Franklin, Roberta Flack, Paul Simon. I mean, worked with
Yeah.
a lot of singers, as did you, and also the Basie
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
So how did you know him?
Well, I guess I had an apartment. I lived in an apartment in New York when Jim and Andy's moved up to 55th at 8th Avenue. And I had an apartment uh, on 55th and 8th Avenue, caddy corner down to Jim and Andy's. So I could look out my window and tell when somebody went in the door or came out the door.
Uh-oh.
It could get expensive too.
I'll bet. A lot of cats hanging out there.
Yeah, yeah.
So
But
is
I
that where
mean,
you met him?
yeah, because I guess I was hanging out there with and it could have been Mel Lewis or it was Jake Hanna, one of them, and I'd gotten a paycheck from some kind of recording or something, and I didn't have a bank in New York, so I'd asked them, "Hey man, can you help me cash this check?" So
Mm-hmm.
he went to Jim, and he said, "Hey Jim, I want you to cash my Harold Jones would like to cash his check here." And all Jim did was look at Jake and said, "Do you know him?" And he said, "Yeah." And Jake took my check and cashed it. I mean, so that was the kind of trust and love that went on there. I heard when he died that there was a lot of money owed him that
Mm-hmm.
his wife started to go after. It wasn't me. Yeah. But that's how good he was. Yeah. Yeah.
And you guys became fast friends, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
tell us about him. Tell us about his playing, his style, his your reflections, maybe a story or.
Grady just had an impeccable time feel and sense. Um, he wasn't a showman. He wasn't a soloist. He just had impeccable time feel. And when you heard anybody that he was backing up, it was just right there locked in with the bass player. Nobody trying to shine out.
Mm-hmm.
And he had some good rhythm sections, evidently, because I don't remember who the others were, but I remember John Cudini was with him with Peggy Lee. And that's about the one I know for sure. But he was impeccable on that way. And that's all. That's about all I can say about his timing. Unbelievably beautiful. Yeah.
And the the thing about him playing with singers, they loved him because he was a good singer too.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
He
that
has
comes
albums out as a vocalist.
that
Yeah.
oh, yeah, Moondance. He almost had a hit on Moondance, and yeah, he really wanted to be a well-known singer. But at any rate, you can hear it in his playing how he phrases uh,
Yes.
and the dynamics he uses. I heard a funny story about him. I think there used to be a club in Harlem called Basie's, and Grady went up there. Clark told me this story. Grady went up there and had a gig as a singer, got paid at the end of the night in cash, and walked out of the club into the street. And two cats came up to him, stuck a gun in his ribs, and says, "Give us your money." So Grady said, "Oh man, okay," and handed it over. And when he handed the money over, one of the robbers looked at him and said, "By the way, man, you sounded great tonight."
That's hilarious.
I
Yeah.
was just revisiting, because I knew we were going to do this. I was doing a little bit of research. Grady had originally been a singer when he was younger and before he played the drums. And then when his voice started to change, he went back, he started to play the drums. And I know initially he was in the Air Force, and we really don't know that much about him, because he grew up in North Carolina, and then he came to New York when he was around 30.
That's right. He
And
came
we
to New
don't,
York
and
I'm sorry to interrupt. 1963, he came to New York. He was born in 1932.
right. And he had sat in with Wild Bill Davis, and that was one of his first gigs. We sat in, and Wild Bill Davis called him the next day, said, "Hey, man, you want to come out and do some work?" And so, I'm sure he was doing that 6 night a week, hitting it every night, just getting the craft together. But what I love about him is he's always so clear, you know, everything is very clear, and there's a certain kind of transparency with what's going on. And I think my first exposure was probably on Walking in Space here in Killer Joe with him and Ray Brown. And the balance of those two together, it works wonderfully. And then hearing him on all those other records with Jimmy Smith and Wes, and I think it was just like he really knew how to get inside whatever the music was and really help to enhance the situation without really drawing attention to himself. I'm sure if he wasn't there, you would really notice it,
Yeah.
because he really worked as a galvanizing factor to put things all together, which I think ideally most drummers have to do first of all before anything else is taken care of. And he did it in such a beautiful manner. And the reason I went to this when you talked about the singing, Ed, was he had that beautiful hit on the Windmills of Your Mind.
Yeah.
Michel
Which
Legrand.
was Michel Legrand's song. And I never really knew him well personally. I would see him around New York a bunch of times, and he always seemed so together and everything. I heard he was very different than how he portrayed himself. But this is all part of what goes on in our world. But man, just his documentation and the clarity with what he would do, whatever the situation, whether it was a trio, a big band playing with a singer, there's that, he was in it.
Yeah.
And whatever it is, it's incredible to hear.
Yeah.
Hard swinging post bop drummer with a lot of snap crackle, but also known as being a little understated. And he also he hated solos. He didn't like drum solos. He wanted to serve the music.
Right. You
Go
say
ahead, Ed.
snap crackle, and he had a lot of Haynes in him, or
That's
vice
what I was
versa.
thinking.
They both of them tune high, and they use what I would call bright cymbals as opposed to a Blakey kind of cymbal or Joe Chambers kind of cymbal. But I think what I do with my students is I play some Jimmy Smith, Organ Grinder Swing, I think is the album. that Grady's on, and it's just cross stick, backbeat, down the road, straight ahead, no prisoners taken. And then I put on Stan Getz's Sweet Rain album with Chick and Ron Carter and Chick, Ron Carter, and Grady and Getz. And this is a situation where he obviously has the freedom to improvise, as opposed to being more of a just straight ahead blues player with Jimmy. And that, to me, I mean, that's one of the most amazing albums I have ever heard. I mean, it just has so many layers to it. The more you listen to it, the more you hear. And you really hear Grady singing on the drums, how he follows Getz's phrases, how he finishes his phrases or begins them. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable. And the story is, from what I've heard, and Adam might know more about this than I do, is that Grady was not Getz's regular drummer. Haynes was. And for some reason, I don't know what the reason was, but Haynes could not make the date. So they called Grady. And Grady said he wanted to pay homage to Roy, so he has a lot of Roy-isms in his playing in that album. Sound and everything. And this sort of ties in with an interview in which he said how much he enjoyed being a studio drummer. And the interviewer said, why? And he said, because I can be so many people. He said, I love being able to change and to fit into different situations. He called himself a musical chameleon, always changing styles. And I mean, everybody does that to a certain degree to survive. You have to play a lot of different things, but few are the ones who can do it in each style or genre and make you go, who is that? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
there's an honesty with how he's doing it.
Yeah, and just an amazing breadth of stylistic approaches. And I mean, yeah, good Lord, he's almost damn near. Well, hell, he is at the top of my list. Every time I listen to Sweet Rain, there's another revelation. It's just unbelievable.
Well, he was also known as a big band drummer. I know Harold knows that.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah.
And he was with Quincy's band in New York in the 60s. And he said that that was a band full of contractors and leaders. So by doing that gig, he started getting all those calls for all those dates that you're mentioning. And then he also did The Tonight Show for I don't know how many years. Through the late 60s, mid 70s, somewhere in there, before Shaughnessy. He was Doc's drummer on The Tonight Show. And the discography is amazing. I mean, I can pull that up in a minute of who he played with. It's just incredible.
Incredible.
I don't know if you want to put this in. You may want to edit this out, but I heard this whole Sweet Rain story from Swallow years ago.
Uh-huh.
And, because that was the working band was Roy, Swallow, and Chick.
Uh-huh.
And they go in, and Swallow told me they went in to do the date, and Stan was having a bad day. And he's trying to deal with some of those tunes. Those Chick tunes are not particularly easy. And as we know, I mean, you may know or not know, we know, Stan totally played by ear. He knew nothing about theory. Everything was by ear. And so
I didn't know that.
At this date, Stan's having a rough time. And so Creed Taylor was producing the session. So it was like, okay, we gotta cancel the session, Our leader's having a bad day. So Creed couldn't go to the people upstairs and say, your golden boy was having a bad day. They were saying, yeah, things weren't right with the rhythm section. So what happened was Swallow told me he got a call from Creed's secretary stating, okay, Mr. Swallow, are you available for this date? And he goes, yeah, sure. And she goes, all right, now I have to call Mr. Tate. And Swallow said, what? It's supposed to be Haynes. She goes, no, I have instructions to call Mr. Tate. And Swallow, with the solidarity and mensch that he is, said, if Haynes ain't there, I ain't making it. Consequently, they called Ron. And Swallow, that just makes you love the guy even more. But like, I'm standing with my brother.
Yeah.
And I heard Bob Belden, who was a dear friend of ours, who was an amazing collector and always digging into the archives. He found the session, the unissued Sweet Rain tracks with Roy, and the band is on fire, completely on fire. And Stan, you could hear he's having a hard time. And maybe they were kicking Stan's ass too much, but he couldn't deal that day. But Ron came in, they called him. He's, if you listen closely, there's some suspect stuff going on here and there, because he gets the call, man. It's a 3-hour record date. Come in, read the shit, and hope for the best. No rehearsal. We know what that's like. But I mean, if you guys are ever interested, I have those outtakes that I got from Belden, and it's just great to hear. But that was a backstory I heard years ago, and Grady came in, and it's like, well, I'm sitting in Roy's chair. I want to pay homage to my man and do the best I can, and having that chameleon ability. But
Well,
I
that's a
just
great
thought that was
story. I'm not going to cut
man,
that. That's a great story from a reliable source, and it's indicative of the things that happen in the industry.
Yeah, things happen, and Stan Getz was one of those people. I mean, as a musician, maybe one of the most naturally gifted I ever was around, or ever, completely played by ear. The music was easy, life not so easy.
I
We
didn't know
know a
that
lot
about
of
him.
people like that.
I heard just as a sidebar, I heard Getz's group with Richie Byrack and Dave Holland and DeJohnette in Chicago, and Getz they'd get so, the intensity of that band was so great, and Getz would go as far as he could go, and then stop playing, get off the bandstand, and just stand there and listen to the trio. He was just completely taken by those guys. There was no animosity at all. And afterwards, I was in there with Woody, and our band, Woody's band, was in town. So Woody and I went down to hear on night off to hear, and so Getz came over to the table to see Woody, and they were, hey, how you doing and all that, and Getz just said, man, those guys sound so good. I just want to sit there and listen to them. Which I thought was a wonderful, wonderful compliment from a guy who is so often maligned, because there's a lot of nice guys, as Zoot used to say. But yeah, he was. The music was there. The music was at his heart. And if you've ever seen that YouTube clip with Stanley Clarke and Chick and Tony sitting in, oh my God Almighty, Getz is just digging on Tony so hard, it's ridiculous. Yeah.
The look I love that's that one from Montreux.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And what I love is right before they're about to hit, Stanley Clarke, he's the rookie,
Yeah, exactly.
And Tony just gives him a look like, are you ready? I got this. You just check it out. You see that look, it's like, and it's incredible. And those drums were Steve Gadd's drums.
Right.
And they're up at Zildjian now. And the crazy thing is, Tony's playing Pistes.
I know.
He must have just showed up at the gig from somewhere. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, he played Tate a lot when he was in Europe with Miles. Yeah. Some of those
really
bootleg recordings. Yeah.
Yeah, I bet it was backline gear. But the interesting thing is, Paiste is like sonically opposite the Tony old K sound, and it still sounded just like Tony.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting how we've kind of morphed around to this thing, but it's interesting when we're talking about sound. I think of Joe Chambers also has that impeccable clarity with his cymbal beat, and there's a certain kind of evenness with it. And he's very transparent, but there's also a lot of activity under that, and it never interferes with the flow of his time feel. It's always so beautiful. And I've seen that image in my mind when I listen to Joe sometimes. It's like looking at a lake in the morning when everything is still on the surface, but underneath, there's all this stuff going on. And Joe had that ability to create these other kind of dimensions. And I mean, I was just, looking at my collection of all these records that I love with Bobby Hutcherson, Wayne Shorter. It's there's so many, and he's just such a wonderful player, and he's coming to the drums as he was also he is a very fine pianist and composer. And you hear that sense when he plays. You're really hearing a musician playing the drums. And something about him. Another person who I feel, a lot of the youngsters should really be hip to.
Yeah. I found Joe made, amongst others, I'm sure, made 3 albums in 1966, each within a few months of each other. And they were Mode for Joe, Inner Space, Chick Corea, and Wayne Shorter's Adam's Apple. So what I suggest to anybody out there who's watching this is that they get those 3 recordings and listen to them and hear the many shapes and sounds of Joe Chambers. It's absolutely astounding, but it's astounding, but like it's expected. Just like Harold can play beautifully with a trio and then turn around and play with something like Basie. So I mean, it's a skill that all great musicians who happen to play drums have. But it's also interesting with Joe's aspect is that you wish you could, maybe someday if I see him again, you can ask him, why'd you use that cymbal? Why didn't you use the ride cymbal that you had on Mode for Joe? Why didn't you use it on the Chick album? Because it's a whole different texture. It's a whole different sound. And obviously the music is a lot different. There's some really free stuff going on. It's not like Joe's time or Joe's rhythm section at all. So, there's so many things that, guys, you could really do such in-depth studies with this guys, because I know in most cases it's a matter of they play a particular cymbal or have a particular tuning because they think it's best for the particular situation they're playing in. I would assume that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
the story I heard was somebody thought that on Mode for Joe, it was like they asked him, what was that symbol? He goes, I think it was just some A that I got somewhere.
Yeah.
Some old A. And we also have to remember something, Ed. Inner Space with Chick Corea was not a Rudy Van Gelder recording.
No, it wasn't. It's a whole different.
It was done. It originally came out on that division of Atlantic. I think it was Vortex Records, and it came out. I think it was like a division that Herbie Mann may have had with Atlantic.
Well, he was a producer.
Yeah, and that's a different thing, and that's different than Rudy. Mm-hmm. So that record first was called Tones for Jones Bones, and then it was reissued as a larger set with some more tunes called Inner Space. And that's a wonderful recording with, Woody Shaw, Joe Farrell, Swallow is playing on that.
Yeah.
And
those are classic, legendary recordings.
Oh, man.
Some of my favorites. Now, he also played with like Eric Dolphy, Mingus. Yeah. We just mentioned Wayne, Chick, Miles, Joe Henderson, Freddie Hubbard, Lee Konitz. I mean, those are all different. Maybe young drummers are looking at this thinking they want to get their jazz thing together, but that's a wide, all-encompassing thing. You know what I mean? That's a life's work.
It's all jazz, too.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah, I think of course, young people don't realize what the scene was like in the 60s. I mean, there was so much of this music going on that, I mean, it was everybody was up for hire. I mean, just because you worked with somebody didn't you mean that you were their drummer.
Yeah.
Whoever called you, you played with, and if people called you, they heard through the grapevine. They didn't go look at your website. They heard through the grapevine that
Right.
this cat can play,
Right.
and it was a very tight community.
Yeah.
And that's the one drag about of what we have now, a virtual community. It's not like the old one where it was person to person.
The other thing some people
Whole
have
different
trouble
ballgame.
getting next to with jazz groups is that there are very few bands that are bands for a long period of time because all these people wanted to work with each other. So, you know, the old joke is he worked with this person, this person, this person, couldn't keep a job.
Yeah.
But in reality, in this genre, it's not uncommon to you look at the leader and then you want to look at the back of the album in the old days and see who's on it because it's liable to be different people on each album that leader has.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's what these people were in that coterie of players that did those Blue Note albums. And
it was a family. It was like a tribe of people
Right.
that were, you know, interchangeable. You know, you'd see Grady Tate on a lot of records. You'd see Joe Chambers on a lot of records. You'd see Higgins. You'd see Mickey Roker. You know, these people that were involved in these scenes. And I mean, you know, Mel Lewis, you know, Harold, different
Cheryl,
cats.
Shelley, and the same applies to all the other instruments too.
Of course, Shelley Mann, of course. Yeah. You know, why are they there? Because they always take care of business and they let the music tell them how to play.
Now,
and the
Joe,
styles, because the way you're going to play with Lee Konitz is going to be a little different than how you play with Joe Henderson. And, you know, Joe also was recording with Archie Shepp and people like that. So the scope was so broad. And I mean, these are the people that to me are my inspirations. You know, they can go in and fulfill the obligation of what the gig is about. You know, what's the music tell you to play? And still end up at a certain point being you.
he was also
in
a
spite of
writer.
everything.
He was also a writer and a composer and a good mallet player, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Played
I
vibes,
used
I
to
know,
hear
in
that
M
band
Boom.
in Boom. That
Yeah.
was a wonderful group to hear.
I heard that live. Yeah. That was a percussion ensemble of sorts started by Max Roach, involving all kinds of legendary drummers. And if you can find those M Boom records, those are pretty cool too.
Yeah, you know, he had Warren Smith, he had Freddie Waits, he had Joe, he had Fred King, he had Ray Mantilla in there.
Omar Clay. He had Omar Clay.
Yeah.
Omar Clay, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's like a
Is he
jazz
still out
percussion
there?
ensemble.
Nope.
Oh,
Well, Joe's still around. He's 82, from what I read.
yeah. He's down in North Carolina, from what I understand.
Yeah, he was teaching at a University of North Carolina in Wilmington.
Is he still there?
I don't know. He's 82. I doubt if he's still teaching.
I don't think he's there. I mean, because I know in between the lady pianist who passed away was teaching there. Oh, sorry, I can't think of her name. Yeah, I don't think Joe is still there.
Mary Lou Williams?
No.
Brad King?
No.
Oh, well.
The black lady. Almost. I'll have it before we're done. I got a great memory. It's just short.
All right. Anybody else want to throw down some more info on these cats? I mean, we're talking about Joe Chambers, the two great drummers that are worthy of much wider recognition in all communities, and the great Grady Tate. Now, Grady was also an actor, by the way.
Huh.
A short story about Grady Tate.
Yeah, please.
During my tenure with Sarah Vaughan, she got a song came into a studio that we were going to record, Moody's Mood for Love. Well, she wanted to sing this song, and then she wanted a male voice on that bridge part, where the guy starts singing. And so we was in the recording studio, and she tried to have me take it once, two, three, 5, 10 times, 20 times. And you know how expensive studios are. After about 20, 30 times, she said, "Well, Harold, you can't sing." And so, because it was costing her a fortune to listen to this bad stuff. So we were playing someplace like the Blue Note, and she called up Grady Tate to come down and sing that bridge part in Moody's Mood for Love. And of course, I want to say he did it like about every night. I don't think any of that ever got recorded.
Huh.
And consequently, when we left town and went on the road, she was doing that tune. She didn't have Grady. She sang the man's part. Yeah.
Well, you were known as the singer's drummer. You were never known as the singing drummer.
Right. Thank you very much.
That's a big difference.
Yeah. Yeah, boy.
Oh, man.
All right. Well, we have the referee down there. I thought you were the governor, man. Hey, the referee. Basie called him the governor. That's Harold.
You've done your homework.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, man.
Well, we're going to continue with these series of until we think of something else. I originally wanted to be like Seinfeld, where somebody can't find a parking space. That's a show.
Yeah.
So just get some drummers together and
You
talk
know-
about whatever we want. But I like this format.
Yeah.
I'll put a little blurb out. Mosaic Records, who put together these incredible box sets, they recently put together a Bobby Hutcherson box of all the things that Bobby did for Blue Note. And Joe Chambers is on the majority of those recordings. And they include Freddie Hubbard, Herbie Hancock, James Spaulding, Richard Davis, Ron Carter, you name it. There's so many great musicians on there. And there's a lot of Joe Chambers compositions on these records. And they're just wonderful. So, try to go out there and support. Bobby was a wonderful musician. And, it's great to hear the chemistry and to hear how these people work together. Andrew Hill was on some of these, Stanley Cowell, Harold Land. There's a lot of great stuff out there. And, I'm quite the collector, so I'm always looking for this stuff. And it's just stuff that's opened up my head and helped to make me a better musician. So
Well, I'm
I
sure
have
that'll.
to put that
I'm
out
sure it'll
there.
do it for everybody else. If you want to look these guys up, please do. Grady Tate, Joe Chambers, and while you're at it, check out Adam Nussbaum, Harold Jones, and Ed Soph, all of whom could be the subject of these shows as well. I appreciate the august company I'm in today, and we'll choose some more of these. Harold, you're welcome anytime here, and appreciate you coming. Appreciate both you guys.
Okay.
Both? No, both the other guys. All three of you guys.
Okay.
All right, everybody. It's Halloween tomorrow, so have a good time. There's an
Yeah.
election coming up. We're not going to get political here, but please vote for somebody. Just get out and vote. All right. There's some scary
All right.
cats there.
Take care.
I like the top. It completes it. All right, everybody. We'll catch you next time on Drummer Nation. Thanks.
Great to see everybody. Stay well.
All
You
right.
too.
Yeah.